The wind had a way of whispering lies, twisting memories into ghosts. 10 years. 10 years since it ripped her from him, a tornado on the plains, and he hadn't seen her since. Not a trace, not a single sign, until today. A wild mustang, all muscle and untamed spirit, galloped into his life, a warm leather saddle on its back. And there, glinting in the harsh sunlight, dangling from the saddle horn, was her pendant, his breath hitched. It was impossible, yet there it was, a beacon of a past he buried deep. The storm, the very one that took her, was brewing on the horizon, a dark, churning beast. He knew, deep in his gut, he had to ride into it one last time. Dust swirled around Jebediah Jebstone's boots as he mended a fence post, the rhythmic thud of his hammer against wood a familiar comfort. The endless expanse of the high plains stretched before him, a sea of golden grass under an impossibly blue sky. For 10 years, this ranch, inherited from his grandpappy, had been his anchor, a quiet refuge from a grief that still clawed at his insides. His only company, besides the cattle, was Old Man Hemlock, a grizzled ranch hand whose wisdom was as weathered as his face. Hemlock was currently sharpening a hunting knife, the rasping sound cutting through the afternoon stillness. "Looks like a squall's comin', Jeb," Hemlock drawled, not looking up from his task. His voice was like gravel, worn smooth by years of infrequent use. Jeb squinted at the horizon. A distant dark smudge was indeed beginning to crawl upwards, a familiar and unwelcome sight. "Just what we need," he muttered, hammering the last nail home. Another day, another fight with the weather. He wiped a hand across his brow, the sun beating down relentless. It was then he saw it, a blur of movement on the western ridge, faster than any domestic horse. A wild mustang, pure black, its mane and tail flying like a banner. It was a magnificent creature, powerful and untamed. But what caught Jeb's eye, what made his heart lurch and his blood run cold, wasn't the horse itself. It was the saddle. A beat-up, leather saddle, clearly not new, but not ancient either. And dangling from its horn, catching the sunlight in a way that made his stomach knot, was a small silver pendant. Jeb froze, his hammer slipping from his grasp and thudding softly into the dust. He knew that pendant. He'd given it to her on her 16th birthday, a simple silver locket with an engraved wildflower. He hadn't seen it since that day, 10 years ago, when the storm had swallowed her whole. Hemlock, sensing the sudden shift in Jeb's demeanor, looked up. His keen eyes followed Jeb's gaze to the distant mustang. "Well, I'll be," he mumbled, a rare note of surprise in his voice. "That's a wild one, all right. Never seen a saddle on a wild horse before." Jeb didn't hear him. His mind was a whirlwind, grappling with the impossible. How could her pendant be on a wild horse, 10 years later, hundreds of miles from where she vanished? Was it a cruel trick of the light? A hallucination brought on by the relentless sun and an old wound? He shook his head, trying to clear the fog. But the image was clear, undeniable. A cold dread settled over him, mingling with a desperate, burgeoning hope he'd long since extinguished. The storm cloud on the horizon seemed to swell, a dark maw opening to devour the sun. It was the same direction the mustang had come from, the same direction the last storm had rolled in from. A coincidence? He didn't believe in them. His jaw tightened. He had to know. He had to follow. No matter what it meant, no matter how much it ripped open old wounds. This wasn't just a storm anymore. This was a message. And he had to answer it. Jeb rode hard, the black mustang a ghost ahead of him, always just out of reach. The wind whipped at his clothes, carrying the scent of rain and ozone. The sky was turning a bruised purple, the sun a mere memory behind a wall of gathering clouds. He pushed his horse, Old Blue, a steady, reliable mar, to her limits. But the wild creature was faster, more agile, a product of the untamed land. "Damn it," Jeb muttered. leaning low over Blue's neck. He cursed his own mounting desperation, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to entertain in years. Every gallop of Blue's hooves echoed with the frantic beat of his own heart. The pendant, a tiny glint in the fading light, beckoned him forward, a cruel siren song. Suddenly, the Mustang veered sharply, disappearing into a narrow, winding canyon Jeb hadn't noticed before. He followed, urging Blue to pick her way through the rocky terrain. The canyon walls rose steeply on either side, casting long, ominous shadows. The wind howled through the crevices, a mournful lament. The air grew heavy, charged with an unsettling energy. As he rounded a bend, the canyon opened slightly, and he saw a campfire flickering ahead. Beside it, crouched low, was a figure. Not a cowboy, not a prospector. This man was different. Lean and wiry, with eyes that seemed to hold the vastness of the plains within them. He wore buckskin and carried a bow, not a rifle. A Native American, a tracker perhaps, or someone who lived off the land, far from the settlements. The Mustang was tethered nearby, nuzzling at a small pile of feed. Jeb dismounted slowly, his hand instinctively going to the colt on his hip. "Evenin'," he said, his voice flat, wary. The man didn't startle. He simply looked up, his gaze meeting Jeb's, unblinking. He had a weathered face, etched with lines that spoke of long days under the sun and harsh winters. His silence was not empty. It was a wall, a challenge. "That your horse?" Jeb asked, gesturing to the Mustang with his chin. The man grunted, a low, guttural sound that could mean anything. He picked up a piece of jerky from a small pouch and tore off a bite. "That pendant," Jeb continued, his voice tight. "On its saddle. Where'd you get it?" The man chewed slowly, his eyes never leaving Jeb's. He swallowed. "Found him. Storm took him from somewhere. He wandered onto my land." His voice was deep, resonant, like stones rolling in a riverbed. Jeb took a step closer. "The pendant, the silver one. It belongs to someone I know. Someone I lost." The man's gaze flickered to the pendant, then back to Jeb. "Lost, you say?" He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "The storm takes what it wants." "It took her," Jeb said, the words a raw whisper. 10 years ago. In a storm, just like the one coming now. The man's expression remained unreadable. He reached out and stroked the Mustang's nose. "This one," he said, his voice softer. "He carries a spirit. A strong one." He then looked at Jeb, a hint of something unreadable in his eyes. "You seek what the wind has stolen. Be warned, the wind does not easily return its treasures." Jeb felt a cold shiver run down his spine, despite the heat of the fire. The man knew, or he seemed to know. He was speaking in riddles, yet there was a truth in his words that resonated with Jeb's deepest fears. He wanted answers, but this man wasn't offering them freely. "I need to know where this horse came from," Jeb pressed, his patience wearing thin. The man sighed, a puff of smoke escaping his lips. He rose slowly, his movements fluid and silent. He walked over to the Mustang, untethered it, and then, without a word, he swung onto its bare back. The Mustang, usually wild and defiant, stood docile, almost expectant. "The storm comes," the man said, his voice carrying on the rising wind. "It calls you. It calls him." He nodded toward the pendant. "You follow. You lose more than you know." And then, with a silent nudge, the Mustang bolted, disappearing back into the winding depths of the canyon, taking with it the pendant, the last tangible link to a past Jeb was desperate to reclaim. He stood there, watching the dust settle, the sound of the horse's hooves fading into the rising crescendo of the wind. He had found a lead, a fragile thread to follow, but in doing so, he had lost the very thing that had drawn him here. The Mustang and the pendant it carried were gone again, swallowed by the impending darkness. Jeb stood alone in the darkening canyon, the chill of the evening wind seeping into his bones. The Native American and the Mustang were gone, leaving only the lingering scent of wood smoke and the deepening sense of urgency. The man's words echoed in his mind. You follow, you lose more than you know. A warning or a prophecy? He mounted Blue, his gaze fixed on the way the Mustang had vanished. The canyon twisted and turned, leading him deeper into the heart of the wildlands, away from the familiar comfort of the plains. As Blue picked her way through a narrow pass, a sudden gust of wind brought with it a scent, faint but unmistakable. The sweet, earthy smell of honeysuckle. Honeysuckle. The scent hit him like a physical blow, pulling him back, a decade in an instant. He was 19, she was 16, her laughter bright as the prairie sung. They were sitting by the creek, sharing a piece of dried apple pie his ma had made. Honeysuckle bloomed wildly around them, its fragrance heavy and sweet in the summer air. She was braiding a small wildflower into her hair, humming a tune he couldn't quite place. You know, she said, her eyes sparkling, sometimes I wish I could just fly. Just let the wind take me, see where it goes. He chuckled, ruffling her hair. Sounds lonely. And probably cold. She just smiled, that wide, innocent smile that could melt the hardest heart. Maybe, but imagine the adventure. The memory dissolved, leaving him with a bitter taste in his mouth. He squeezed his eyes shut, the phantom scent of honeysuckle lingering, a cruel trick of the wind. He'd told her it would be cold. He'd told her it would be lonely. And now, 10 years later, he was chasing a ghost, propelled by a pendant, a symbol of a promise broken by the very wind she'd longed to embrace. The terrain shifted. The high walls of the canyon gave way to a more open, yet still rugged landscape. Jagged rock formations jutted out of the ground like broken teeth, and the sparse vegetation was twisted and gnawed by years of relentless wind. He was no longer in the familiar plains, nor in the shadowed canyons. This was a badlands, a desolate, unforgiving place. Every step Blue took was a silent accusation. His emotions, usually held in check by years of stoic ranch life, were fraying at the edges. The bitterness of lost hope, the sharp pang of longing, the raw ache of a decade-old wound, they all began to surface, threatening to overwhelm him. He gritted his teeth, urging Blue onward. He had to find that Mustang. He had to know. As he rode, a new memory surfaced, darker this time. The storm. It had come out of nowhere, a swirling vortex of black and green, tearing across the plains with unholy speed. He'd shouted her name, desperate, running towards the house, towards her. He'd seen her, just for a moment, standing frozen by the old oak, her face turned to the sky. A strange, almost serene look in her eyes as the wind, a living, breathing entity, wrapped around her. And then, she was gone. Just gone. The oak snapped in half, and where she'd stood, there was nothing but churning dust and the roar of the wind. He felt a wave of nausea. He blamed himself for years. For not reaching her, for not pulling her to safety, for not being fast enough. Now, as he rode deeper into the approaching storm, the familiar guilt tightened its grip. Was he chasing a fool's hope, or was this his chance at redemption? He reached a fork in the path. To the left, a well-worn trail leading down into a small, secluded valley, where a faint glow hinted at a distant settlement. To the right, a barely visible track, heading directly into the heart of the approaching storm, into the teeth of the rising wind. The Mustang, he knew, had gone right. His heart screamed to follow the pendant, to chase the last thread of hope. But his head, the sensible, pragmatic part of him, urged him towards the safety of the valley, towards shelter from the imminent tempest. He hesitated, Blue shifting restlessly beneath him. To follow the Mustang meant plunging headlong into the very force that had stolen her from him a decade ago. It meant confronting the raw, untamed power of the land, and perhaps the truth he feared most. To turn back, to choose reason over the whisper of his heart, meant abandoning the only lead he'd had in 10 long years. He looked at the churning dark sky, then at the faint glow of the distant settlement. One path offered a chance, however slim, at understanding. The other offered only escape. He had to choose. Jeb chose the storm. His spurs dug into Blue's flanks, sending her into a gallop down the faint, treacherous path. The wind, now a relentless roar, tore at him, threatening to rip him from the saddle. Dust and grit, propelled by the gale, stung his eyes, forcing him to squint. The sky was an angry, swirling mass of black and gray, occasionally illuminated by a flash of distant lightning. The air vibrated with an ominous energy. He pushed Blue harder, ignoring the mare's strained breathing. The trail grew steeper, leading him up a rocky incline, a jagged spine of earth rising into the maelstrom. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to seek shelter. But the image of the pendant, dangling from the mustang's saddle, burned in his mind. A defiant flicker of hope in the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, Blue balked, snorting nervously. Ahead, illuminated by a particularly vivid flash of lightning, stood the Native American. He was on foot, silhouetted against the tumultuous sky, his buckskin cloak flapping wildly around him. And beside him, calm amidst the chaos, was the black mustang. The pendant gleamed. Jeb dismounted, his legs stiff, his muscles screaming in protest. The wind nearly ripped his hat from his head, but he held on. "You!" he shouted, his voice barely audible above the storm's fury. "Why are you here? Why won't you let me have that pendant?" The man didn't answer immediately. He simply watched Jeb approach, his eyes, even in the gloom, seeming to glow with an inner light. The mustang nuzzled his hand, its eyes calm, almost understanding. "The wind takes what it wants," the man finally said, his voice strangely clear, cutting through the roar of the storm. "And sometimes it gives back, but not easily, and never without a price." "What price?" Jeb demanded, frustration and desperation clawing at him. "What do you know about this? About her?" The man gestured to the mustang. "He carries a burden, a memory. He sought me out, to bring you here." Jeb's mind reeled. "To bring me? Where?" "To the heart of the storm," the man replied, his gaze unwavering. "Where she truly went." Another, more powerful gust of wind slammed into them, nearly knocking Jeb off his feet. The lightning flashed closer now, illuminating the peak of the ridge above them. There, a strange shimmering vortex was forming, a transparent column of swirling air, crackling with an almost ethereal light. It wasn't a typical tornado. It was different. "What is that?" Jeb breathed, a cold dread seizing him. "The gate," the man said, his voice solemn. "The place where the wind carried her, not to death, not to oblivion. To another place. She sought adventure." The wind answered. Jeb stared, his heart pounding against his ribs. Another place? It was madness. Impossible. Yet, a part of him, the part that had always refused to believe she was simply gone, wanted desperately to believe it. "And the pendant?" Jeb asked, his voice strained. The man reached out, unhooking the pendant from the mustang's saddle. He held it out to Jeb. She sent it. A sign. A call. Just as Jeb reached for it, a sudden, blinding flash of lightning ripped across the sky directly above them, followed by an earth-shattering clap of thunder. The ground trembled violently. A massive bolt struck a nearby rock formation, shattering it into a shower of incandescent fragments. A wave of concussive force slammed into Jeb, throwing him backward. He landed hard, his head hitting the unforgiving rock. Darkness threatened to consume him. He heard the Native American shout something, saw the mustang rear, its eyes wide with fear. The pendant, now loosened from the man's grasp, flew through the air, a silver projectile caught in the furious wind, and vanished into the shimmering vortex on the ridge. Everything seemed to slow down. He could see the vortex pulsating, drawing everything towards it. The Native American, still standing, looked at him with an expression he couldn't decipher: pity? Regret? Then the man turned, his gaze fixed on the disappearing pendant, then back at Jeb. He made a quick, decisive movement, and then, with a strange, almost resigned grace, he walked towards the vortex, stepping into the swirling light as if drawn by an unseen hand. He simply vanished, leaving Jeb sprawled on the ground, bruised and dazed. Watching the shimmering column of light begin to contract, to fade, all seemed lost. He was alone, the pendant gone, the mysterious guide vanished, and the storm reaching its terrifying climax. Jeb lay there, the taste of dust and blood in his mouth, the wind still howling its fury around him. His head throbbed, and a searing pain shot through his arm as he tried to push himself up. He was alone, truly alone. Old Blue had bolted, probably seeking shelter in some hidden crevice. The shimmering vortex had indeed contracted, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer now where the powerful column of light had been. The storm, though still raging, seemed to have passed its peak, the thunder less frequent, the lightning more distant. He managed to sit up, leaning against a rough rock face. The silence, despite the wind's constant shriek, was deafening. The kind of silence that settles in after a monumental loss, when the echoes of chaos fade, leaving only emptiness. He was broken, physically and emotionally. The desperate hope that had driven him here felt like a cruel joke. He had followed the pendant, risked everything, only to lose it, and the mysterious guide into that impossible light. Was this her fate? To be swallowed by something he couldn't comprehend, couldn't fight. A wave of profound weariness washed over him. He was a cowboy, a man of the plains, grounded in the tangible, the real. Ghosts and portals to other dimensions were the stuff of campfire tales, not his life. Yet, he had seen it. He had felt the pull of it. He thought of all the years he'd spent on the ranch, the quiet solitude he'd embraced, believing it was all that was left for him. He'd built walls around his heart, brick by painful brick. And in the space of a single day, a wild mustang and a silver pendant had torn them all down. He had come here, driven by a sliver of hope, only to have it ripped away, leaving him more exposed, more vulnerable than he had been in a decade. Even in his ranch house, surrounded by his own things, he often felt a profound loneliness, a sense of being separate, apart, even when Hemlock was nearby. Now, truly alone in this desolate landscape, that feeling was amplified 100-fold. As the last vestiges of twilight faded, replaced by the bruised purple of night, a tiny, almost imperceptible glimmer caught his eye. It was at the base of the rock where the Native American had stood. He crawled towards it, wincing at the pain in his arm. It was a small, crudely carved wooden figurine, no bigger than his thumb. A horse. A mustang, with a tiny, almost invisible indentation on its back, as if something had once been attached there. And beside it, partially buried in the dust, was a single, perfectly preserved honeysuckle bloom. He picked it up, his fingers tracing the delicate petals. The same honeysuckle from his memory, from that last innocent day. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Yet there it was, vibrant and fragrant in his palm. It was the Native American's doing. He knew it. A final message, a last chance, appearing from nowhere. A desperate, impossible hope sparked within him once more. This wasn't just a flower. This was a clue, a path, from the heart of the storm. It was a sign, perhaps from her, perhaps from the mysterious world she had entered. He looked at the tiny wooden mustang, then at the honeysuckle. The Native American hadn't taken the pendant to keep it from him, but perhaps to send it through. And this little horse and flower, was a gift, a guide. It meant she was alive. It meant there was a way. But the way lay through the fading shimmer on the ridge. Through a world he didn't understand, into the unknown. It was a leap of faith, a risk so enormous it made his broken arm feel like a minor scratch. He could turn back, nurse his wounds, retreat to his lonely ranch. Or he could follow this impossible, fragile thread. With a deep, shuddering breath, Jeb pushed himself to his feet, the honeysuckle clutched in his good hand. Courage and profound doubt warring within him as he staggered towards the shimmer on the ridge, towards the faint, lingering echo of the storm. Jeb walked, stumbled, and crawled towards the barely visible shimmer on the ridge. The wind, though calmer, still whispered insidious doubts in his ear. His body screamed in protest, but a new kind of fire, fueled by the honeysuckle and the wooden mustang, burned in his soul. It reached the spot where the vortex had been, and it was almost gone, a faint ripple in the air, like heat rising from a desert floor. He hesitated, then pushed his hand through it. It felt like cool water, then nothing. Taking a deep breath, he stepped through. He expected to be ripped apart or transported to some alien world. Instead, he simply stepped onto grass, soft green grass, unlike anything he'd ever seen on the high plains. The air was still, sweet with 1,000 unfamiliar floral scents, and the sky above was a gentle, perpetual twilight, illuminated by 2 moons, one silver, one a soft, ethereal blue. He stood in a vast open meadow, surrounded by impossibly tall, glowing flora. And then he saw her. She was older, of course. Her hair, once sun-streaked blonde, now held streaks of silver that shimmered in the strange light. She was tending to a small herd of what looked like deer, but with iridescent antlers. Her movements were graceful, purposeful. She wore clothes woven from plant fibers, and around her neck, clear as day, was the silver pendant. Sarah? His voice was a raw croak, hoarse from disuse and the journey. She turned slowly, her eyes wide, then narrowed in disbelief. A small smile, tentative, then widening, spread across her face. Jeb? He ran towards her, pain forgotten, a decade of buried grief and longing exploding within him. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, holding her as if she might vanish again. She was real, tangible. The scent of honeysuckle was strong on her. Real now, not just a memory. I thought you were gone, he choked out, tears streaming down his face. All these years. She pulled back slightly, her hand touching his bruised face, then his injured arm. I was. To hear. The wind. It brought me. She looked around at the peaceful, otherworldly landscape. It's beautiful, Jeb. A place of endless adventure, just like I dreamed. He looked at the serene beauty of this alien world, then at the lingering pain in his own body, the raw wounds on his soul. This was her home now. This place, where the wind carried her, was where she belonged. And he, a man of dust and harsh reality, did not. The pendant, he said, touching it. You sent it? She nodded. I learned how. I had to let you know. I had to tell you I was alive. I missed you, Jeb, more than words can say. Her eyes welled up. But I can't go back. This is where I truly live now. This is my purpose. His heart ached, a deep, profound sorrow that settled heavy in his chest. He had found her, yes, but she was not lost in the way he thought. She was found in a place he could never truly belong. The adventurous spirit he'd always admired, and sometimes feared, had truly taken her to another realm. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the small, carved wooden mustang and the honeysuckle. He held them out to her. He brought me here, he said, nodding towards the phantom presence of the Native American. And this made me believe. She took them, her eyes softening. He's a guardian, of sorts. A bridge between worlds. He saw your heart, Jeb. He knew you needed to know. He looked back at the faint shimmer, the portal that connected their worlds. He could go back. To his ranch, to his solitude, to the life he knew. But he wouldn't be the same man. He had faced the impossible, traversed the veil between realms, and confronted the truth of his loss. Not a death, but a transformation. An embrace of a destiny he could never share. He took her hands, his gaze holding hers. "I'm glad you're well, Sarah. Truly. I always will be." It was a goodbye, not just to her, but to the ghost of what they might have been. She understood. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also a quiet strength. "Jebediah Stone," she whispered, her voice full of affection. "May the wind always carry you to where you're meant to be." He nodded, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. He turned and walked back towards the shimmering portal, his steps slow but resolute. He left a piece of his heart in that twilight meadow, but he carried something new within him, a profound peace, born of understanding, and the quiet strength that came from facing the unknown. He stepped back through the shimmer, back into the familiar, harsh reality of the high plains, where the dawn was just breaking, painting the sky in fiery hues. He was still the cowboy, a man of the land, but now he was also a man who had walked between worlds, carrying a quiet wisdom and a love that transcended time and space. The wind still whispered across the plains, but now, to Jeb, it carried not just echoes of loss, but the promise of an unseen journey, forever etched in the soul of the cowboy.